It was a regular Tuesday night when I opened my banking app, the same way I always did. Half awake, sitting on the edge of my bed, Manhattan traffic hissing through a cracked window. A reminder popped up. Auto transfer scheduled in 3 days. I stared at it for a second, thumb hovering, then locked my phone and set it face down on the nightstand. Because 2 weeks earlier, at my parents' anniversary dinner outside Seattle, my dad had looked at the card I gave him and said, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, "So, you sent 60? Not $60. He said it like it was 60 cents, like it proved something. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap while everyone waited for me to explain myself. And that's the part that still sticks with me. How calm I looked on the outside, while something in me quietly clicked into place. Later that night, in my hotel room, I forwarded myself a folder of receipts I'd never shown anyone before. PDFs, confirmation numbers, 4 years of clean little transactions, neat, boring proof. I didn't know yet who would see them. I only knew I was done being misunderstood, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Lauren, and I'm 33. I work in portfolio operations for a firm in New York. Steady job, good income, the kind of life that looks settled if you skim it from a distance. Growing up, I didn't feel settled. I felt managed. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Tacoma, in a small house that always smelled faintly like steamed rice and fabric detergent. My parents immigrated from South Korea when I was a toddler. My dad took overtime whenever it was offered. My mom did alterations for neighbors, hemming pants, taking in dresses, always with a pincushion on her wrist and a measuring tape draped around her neck. There were 4 of us, my parents, me, and my younger sister Mina, 3 years behind me, with an easy laugh and the kind of confidence that made adults soften when she walked into a room. Even as kids, it showed in small ways. If Mina wanted the last dumpling, my mom would slide it onto her plate without a word. If Mina wanted the window seat in the car, my dad would tap my shoulder and say, "Let her have it. You're older." If Mina broke something of mine, it was an accident. If I broke something, it was carelessness. I learned early that being the responsible one wasn't a compliment. It was a job title. When I was 8, I spent a week building a solar system model for school. Foam balls painted carefully, fishing line cut to the same length, the whole thing balanced in a cardboard box. The night before it was due, Mina knocked it off the counter reaching for cookies. Planets bounced across the kitchen floor. One snapped clean in half. My dad looked at the mess and sighed like I had created it. "You should have put it somewhere she couldn't reach," he said, already turning back to the TV. Mina stood behind him, wide-eyed. My mom rubbed her back and told her it was okay. Then she handed me a roll of tape. Birthdays followed the same logic. On my 10th birthday, I got a thick set of reference books my mom found on sale. "This will help you later," she said, pleased with herself. Mina, who was 7, got the portable music player I'd been asking for. My dad patted my head and told me I was smart enough to appreciate the right gift. I did what I always did. I swallowed it. I smiled. I thanked them. By middle school, I cooked rice in the evenings and folded laundry while Mina practiced dance routines in the living room. I had a strict curfew. Mina's curfew somehow shifted later the minute she started asking. And the clearest memory I have from that time isn't even a fight. It's quieter than that. I was 13 when I won a regional piano competition. The recital where they announced winners was on a Saturday afternoon, and I reminded my parents all week. That morning, Mina woke up with a low fever, barely over 100. Our neighbor offered to sit with her. She'd done it before. My parents said no. "We don't leave family when someone is sick," my mom said, like it was a rule carved into stone. So I performed to a room full of strangers under bright lights that made the keys look slightly glossy. I could hear the soft shifting of coats in the audience, the coughs people tried to hide. When they called my name, I walked up, accepted the certificate, and looked out at rows of faces that weren't mine. When I got home, Mina was on the couch with a blanket and a popsicle, flipping channels like nothing had happened. No one asked how it went. I didn't cry. I didn't slam doors. I just went to my room, set the certificate on my desk, and started my homework. That became my pattern. Keep moving, stay useful, don't ask for much. And by the time I left for college, I already had a private habit of preparing for things alone, quietly, in advance, because experience had taught me that waiting to be noticed was a losing strategy. Years later, sitting in that anniversary dinner with my father staring at my card, I felt the same old familiar pressure to shrink myself and smooth everything over. Instead, I stayed still. And when I got back to my hotel room, I opened my laptop, pulled up my transfers, and watched the numbers load one by one. Then I waited. I went back to New York the next morning on an earlier flight. I didn't tell anyone I was changing it. I just packed my overnight bag, checked out, and walked through the hotel lobby like I'd done it 100 times. On the plane, I kept my phone on airplane mode and stared out at the clouds until the tight feeling in my chest eased into something flatter. Not relief, not anger, more like a quiet reset. When I landed, my building hallway smelled like someone's garlic dinner and fresh floor cleaner. I let myself into my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and stood there for a moment with my coat still on. The place was spotless the way it always was. Nothing out, nothing accidental. I liked it that way. That night, I made tea, ate toast over the sink, and opened my laptop again. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't type a long message. I didn't call my parents and demand an explanation. I just logged into my bank and pulled up the recurring transfer I'd set up years earlier. It was scheduled for the first of every month, $5,000. I stared at it, then clicked into the details. The little line of text under the amount read, "Family support." That label used to make me feel grounded, like I was doing something clean and simple. Now it felt overly polite. I canceled the transfer. A small confirmation window appeared. This recurring payment has been stopped. That was it. No sound, no fanfare, just a quiet update on a screen. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed earlier than usual. I slept all the way through the night. The next few days were strangely normal. Work meetings, spreadsheets, coffee that tasted slightly burnt, my manager asking about year-end performance numbers. I answered emails. I sat through a client call where two men talked over each other for 20 minutes. I took notes, kept my tone even, did what I always did. But underneath all of it, I was listening for something. Because if the money really mattered to my parents the way my dad had implied at that dinner, there would be a moment when the absence of it made noise. And if Mina had truly been sending it, as my parents believed, then none of this would even touch her. Either way, something would surface. Growing up, I'd learned to watch for patterns like other people watch for weather. The smallest shift mattered. My parents and I weren't estranged exactly. We spoke once a month or so, polite calls that stayed on the surface. My mom would ask if I was eating enough. My dad would mention something practical, car repairs, a neighbor moving away, the cost of groceries. Mina would appear in the background sometimes, her voice bright, always a little rushed. The strange part was that my parents rarely asked about my life in any real way. They knew I worked in finance. They knew I lived in New York. They knew I was doing well. That seemed to be all they required. When I was younger, I used to think my parents favored Mina because she needed more help. She cried easily. She got overwhelmed. She had that soft, younger child vulnerability that made adults want to step in. I was the opposite. Quiet, high-achieving, self-contained. It looked like strength from the outside, but it also made me convenient. In college, that dynamic didn't change. I went to Boston University, partly because of aid, partly because it was far enough away to feel like a different life. My parents helped move me in, stayed less than an hour, and left before I'd even figured out how to work the ancient dorm radiator. I worked through school, multiple jobs at once. I lived on cheap cafeteria food and whatever I could bring back to my room without getting caught. I learned how to stay awake during lectures by taking notes obsessively. Like if I stopped writing, I might fall apart. One semester, I went 3 weeks without eating a full meal. Not because I wanted sympathy, just because money disappeared faster than I expected, and I didn't want to call home and hear the sigh in my dad's voice. I told myself I didn't need them, and eventually, I built a career on that mindset. After graduation, I started at a firm in Manhattan and moved up faster than most people in my cohort. Not because I was trying to prove a point, more because I didn't know how to do anything halfway. I was reliable. I was precise. I didn't ask for praise. I just produced results. About 4 years ago, my mom mentioned during a phone call that my dad had cut back his hours because of his blood pressure. She said it casually, like it was a small update. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Things are a bit tight right now, with Mina needing help again." I remember standing at my kitchen counter while she talked, the sound of my fridge humming, the faint clink of a spoon in my mug. "How tight?" I asked. My mom hesitated, then admitted their mortgage was behind and they'd used credit cards for medical expenses. That was the moment I decided to help. Not because they begged, they didn't. In fact, my mom protested, the way she always did when something made her uncomfortable. "You should save your money," she said quickly. "We'll manage." But I'd heard that line before. It usually meant, "We'll manage by making you feel guilty later when things get worse." So I set up an automatic transfer. At first it was $2,000 a month. Then I got a raise and increased it. Eventually it became $5,000, without me ever mentioning it out loud. I didn't tell them it was me. I didn't want the attention to shift suddenly. I didn't want my mom calling more. I didn't want my dad acting proud only because money was involved. I wanted the help to be simple. But when I visited for Christmas that first year, my dad raised a glass at dinner and said, "We've been blessed this year, especially thanks to Mina." I remember the way the fork paused halfway to my mouth, the way Mina avoided looking directly at me, like she was suddenly interested in her napkin. My mom smiled, glowing with pride. "She's been sending us support every month," she said. 5,000. Can you believe it? I didn't say anything. I just set my fork down carefully, took a sip of water, and let the moment pass like I always had. That night, after my parents went to bed, I found Mina in the kitchen. She was opening a cabinet softly, trying not to make noise. I kept my voice low. "Did you tell them you're the one sending that money?" She froze, then turned to me slowly. Her face tightened the way it did when she was cornered, not angry, just afraid. "I didn't tell them," she whispered. "They assumed. And you didn't correct them." She looked down at the floor tiles. "I couldn't. They were so happy." I felt something cold and sharp settle behind my ribs, not because I needed credit, not even because of the lie itself, because it meant she understood exactly what it did to me and chose to let it happen anyway. "I'm the one sending it," I said. Her eyes filled, but she didn't deny it. She just said, very quietly, "You don't understand what it's like being compared to you." I stood there in the dim kitchen light, listening to the refrigerator click on, and realized we were living in two completely different versions of the same family. And for 4 years after that, I let it continue, until that anniversary dinner, until my dad looked at my card and said, "So, you sent 60? Until the first month, I stopped the transfers. And then, after a long stretch of silence, exactly 32 days after that dinner, my phone finally rang with my parents' home number. I watched it ring twice before I picked up. I answered on the third ring. "Hi, Dad." His voice sounded careful, like he was choosing each word before letting it out. "Hi, Lauren. How are you?" "I'm fine," I said. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop closed, a legal pad in front of me with nothing written on it. "How are you and Mom?" There was a pause. I could hear a television murmuring somewhere in the background. "We're concerned," he said. "There seems to be an issue with Mina's transfer this month. It didn't come through." I didn't correct him. I let the sentence land. "That's strange," I said evenly. "Did you ask her about it?" "We did," he replied, She said it must be a bank delay, but it's been 2 weeks, and we had already planned around that money. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. The paint above the light fixture had a tiny hairline crack I'd been meaning to fix. "Dad?" I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need to tell you something." He exhaled, a short sound. "Go on." "The monthly transfers you've been receiving for the past few years," I said slowly, "weren't from Mina. They were from me." Silence. Then a small, strained laugh. "That's not funny," he said. "Why would you say something like that about your sister?" "I'm not joking," I replied. "I can show you the records. Every transfer came from my personal account. I set it up 4 years ago." "That doesn't make sense," he said quickly. "Mina told us about her consulting work. She said—" "Dad," I interrupted gently, "please just listen. The transfers came from an account ending in 4736. That's mine. I started with $2,000 a month. After my promotion, I increased it to $5,000. I could hear my mother in the background now, asking what was wrong. My dad covered the phone and murmured something I couldn't make out. When he came back, his voice had hardened. "Are you saying all this because you're upset about the party? Because if this is about jealousy?" I closed my eyes. "Check your bank statements," I said, "or call the bank. I'll email you everything. Confirmation receipts, dates, amounts." There was another pause. Not silence this time, uncertainty. "I don't need to check anything," he said, but the conviction wasn't there. "We trust your sister." "I know," I said. "That's why I never said anything before." I pulled my laptop toward me and opened the folder I'd already prepared. Years of neatly labeled PDFs, automatic confirmations, screenshots, the cancellation notice. "I'm sending you the documents now," I said. "Take your time, look at them, then call me back if you want to talk." I ended the call before he could respond. The email sent in under a minute. Then I waited. I didn't pace. I didn't refresh my inbox. I rinsed my mug, wiped down the counter, and folded the dish towel the way I always did. Edges aligned, corners tucked in. An hour passed, then another. Around 9 that night, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. "How could you do this to your sister?" she said the moment I answered. I sat back down. "Mom, did you look at the documents?" "Documents can be altered," she snapped. "Mina explained everything. She said you agreed to help her route the money for tax reasons." "That's not how taxes work," I said calmly. "And even if it were, it would be illegal. I wouldn't risk my career like that." "She said you wanted to support her," my mom replied, "that you were finally being a good sister." I let the words sit between us. "Mom," I said, "please call the bank. Ask them who initiated the transfers." "We don't need to involve outsiders," she said stiffly. "This is a family matter." The line went quiet after that. Not disconnected, just held. When the call ended, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. 3 days later, my dad called again. This time, there was no small talk. "We contacted the bank," he said. "They confirmed the transfers came from your account." "Yes," I replied. Another pause. Longer than before. "We spoke to Mina," he continued. "She admitted some things. I didn't ask what. I already knew. She's been unemployed for months," he said. "The business never existed. She has debt." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sure who the apology was for. Then his voice softened. "We should have believed you." I didn't answer right away. "We can't manage without that money," he added quietly. "Not the way things are." There it was. "I'm not resuming the payments," I said. "Not like before. We need to talk, all of us, in person." Another pause. Then, "Can you come next weekend?" "Yes," I said, "but we're doing this honestly." After we hung up, I opened my calendar and blocked off the days. Then I closed it again. I put my phone face down and waited. I flew back to Seattle the following Friday night. This time, I stayed at my parents' house. The familiar creak of the front door sounded louder than I remembered. The entryway still smelled faintly of fabric starch and ginger tea. My suitcase rolled over the same scuffed hardwood floor I'd crossed 1,000 times growing up. Everything looked smaller. My mom hugged me briefly, then stepped back as if unsure what to do with her hands. My dad nodded from the hallway. Mina wasn't there yet. Dinner was quiet, not tense exactly, more cautious, like everyone was afraid of saying the wrong thing and making it worse. After we ate, my dad cleared his throat. "Living room," he said. 5 minutes. We sat in the formal living room, the one no one ever used unless guests were over. I took the armchair. My parents sat on the couch. Mina arrived late and perched on the edge of the ottoman, eyes red, shoulders tight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. "We need to talk about the money," I said, "and the assumptions around it." Mina stared at her hands. "The transfers came from me," I continued. "For 4 years. I stopped them last month. That part is not up for debate." No one interrupted. "I want to understand why my support was misrepresented," I said, turning slightly toward Mina. "And I want us to agree on what happens next." Mina swallowed. "I didn't plan it," she said quietly. "The first time they assumed it was me. I didn't correct them." "Why?" I asked. She looked up, eyes wet. "Because they were proud. For once." The room stayed still. "I kept thinking I'd tell them," she continued. "But then another transfer came, and another, and it got harder." I nodded once. "Thank you for saying that." My mom started to speak, then stopped. My dad raised a hand gently. "Let her finish," he said. Mina wiped her face. "I felt like I was always compared to you. Your grades, your job, your stability. I felt like I had nothing solid to point to." I breathed in slowly. "This isn't just about the money," I said. "It's about the roles we were put into." I turned to my parents. "I was expected to manage myself," I said, "to not need help, to absorb disappointment quietly." Mina was protected, encouraged, excused. My mom shook her head but didn't interrupt. "I'm not saying you meant harm," I continued. "I'm saying the impact was real. I felt invisible unless I was being useful." The words landed heavier than I expected. My dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We didn't see it," he said. "You were always capable." "That doesn't mean I didn't need you," I replied. No one spoke for a long moment. Then my dad said, "We relied on the money. We shouldn't have." "I'm not restarting monthly payments," I said calmly. "That system wasn't healthy for any of us." Mina looked up sharply. "But," I added, "I'm willing to help in structured ways." I took a breath and thought in steps, the same way I did at work. "Step 1, I said, full transparency, no assumptions, no anonymous transfers. Step 2, a realistic budget based on your actual income," I said, looking at my parents. "I'll help set it up." Step 3, boundaries. I won't be the fallback solution, emergencies only, and we define what that means. The room was quiet, but not resistant. My dad nodded slowly. "That's fair." Mina looked uncertain. "What about me?" "You build something that's yours," I said. "I can help with guidance, not cover-ups." She nodded, tears slipping down again. We talked late into the night. Not everything was resolved. Some things couldn't be. But the rules were finally on the table. When I went to bed, I placed my suitcase by the door for the morning. The house was silent. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel heavy. The actual confrontation didn't happen that night. It happened the next morning. I woke up early, the way I always do, before anyone else was moving. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator cycling on and off. I made coffee and stood at the counter, hands wrapped around the mug, watching the sky lighten through the kitchen window. By 8, everyone was awake. My dad asked if we could all sit down again before I left. Same living room, same seats. This time, no one avoided eye contact. "I spoke with the bank again this morning," he said. I wanted to hear it directly. I nodded. "Okay." "They confirmed the full timeline," he continued. "Dates, amounts, origination." He paused. "It was you. Every time." No one argued. No one interrupted. My mom pressed her lips together, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Mina stared at the floor. "I need to say something," my dad said, turning to me. "And I'm not asking you to comfort us while I say it." I waited. "We believed what fit our expectations," he said. "And we didn't question it because questioning it would have required us to look at ourselves." My mom inhaled sharply, but didn't disagree. "We assumed you were fine," he continued, "because you always handled things, because you didn't ask, and because you didn't ask, we decided you didn't need." I felt the words land, slow and heavy. "That was wrong," he said. "Not misunderstood. Wrong." I didn't rush to respond. Mina finally looked up. Her voice was small but steady. "I let it continue because it made me feel secure, and I knew it cost you something." I nodded once. "Thank you for saying that." "I don't expect forgiveness," she added quickly. I needed you to hear it." "I do," I said. And this is where the conversation changes. I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said. "I'm here to reset reality." I looked at my parents. "I will not be treated as a resource instead of a person," I said. "And I won't participate in systems that reward silence." Then I looked at Mina. "And I won't carry someone else's stability quietly so they can appear okay." No one pushed back. My mom wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" I answered without hesitation. "The money doesn't resume," I said. "That part is final." My dad nodded slowly. "I will help you restructure," I continued. "Budgeting, planning, downsizing if needed, but not dependency." "And me?" Mina asked. "You're responsible for rebuilding honestly," I said. "I'll help you find tools, not cover consequences." She nodded, jaw tight, but accepting. No raised voices, no accusations, just clear lines. When I stood to leave, my dad surprised me by standing too. "I should have said this earlier," he said, "and more often." He paused, then said it anyway. "I'm proud of you. Not for my job, not for the money, just proud." I let that sit. Then I hugged him, briefly, firmly. As I rolled my suitcase back toward the door, the house felt different. Not healed, but honest. Outside, the air was cool and clean. I loaded my bag into the car, closed the trunk, and stood there for a second with my hand on the metal. Then I got in, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. And for the first time, that felt like progress. 2 years have passed since that weekend. Not everything changed at once. Some things moved slowly, some things resisted, but the direction stayed steady. I didn't resume the monthly payments. That boundary held. Instead, a few weeks after that visit, my dad and I sat down over video and built a real budget. Income, expenses, no assumptions, no padding. We looked at what they could actually afford, not what they were used to relying on. It wasn't dramatic, just numbers on a shared screen and long pauses while reality settled in. They downsized within 6 months. A smaller house, closer to my mom's doctors. My dad picked up a few additional consulting hours. My mom took on tailoring work selectively, projects she enjoyed, not ones that left her exhausted. They adjusted, unevenly at first, then better. Mina's changes were harder. She started therapy, reluctantly, at my insistence that help only came with honesty. She took a retail job that bruised her pride, but paid consistently. For a while, our conversations were stiff, careful, like we were relearning how to speak without performing. But something shifted when the pretending stopped. She admitted she didn't know who she was without approval. that she'd built her identity around being liked, not capable. It wasn't a confession meant to earn sympathy. It was flat, tired, real. I helped her review options, certificate programs, entry-level roles that didn't sound impressive but taught skills. I didn't call in favors. I didn't smooth anything over. She chose one path on her own. Today, she works in visual merchandising for a regional retail chain. Not glamorous, structured, stable. She pays her own rent in a small studio. She's still learning how not to compare herself to me, but now she catches it when she does. We talk once a week, sometimes about work, sometimes about nothing important. She asked me recently how I stay calm in difficult meetings. I told her the truth. Practice. My relationship with my parents changed shape. My dad makes a visible effort now. He asks questions and waits for the answers. When he slips into comparison, he stops himself mid-sentence. It's awkward, but it's real. My mom calls without an agenda, sometimes just to tell me about a recipe she tried or a neighbor she ran into. She apologizes when she realizes she's centering Mina out of habit, not perfectly, but consistently. As for me, the biggest changes happened quietly. I stopped equating exhaustion with value. I leave work earlier. I take weekends seriously. I let silence exist without filling it. I'm still ambitious. That didn't disappear, but it's no longer the only way I know how to be. I also started therapy. Not because everything was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand why I'd spent so long believing that being needed was the same as being loved. That belief took time to untangle. Now, money in my family has rules, transparency, consent, boundaries. We have an emergency fund we all understand. No secrets, no silent expectations. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And that honesty changed everything. On most evenings now, my routine is simple. I get home before dark. I change out of work clothes. I rinse a mug and set it upside down on the drying rack. Sometimes I go for a short walk around the block, phone in my pocket, nothing playing in my ears. Just the sound of traffic settling and people heading home. That kind of quiet used to make me uneasy. Now it feels earned. My life didn't become smaller when I stopped proving myself. It became more precise. My parents still call, not perfectly, not without old habits surfacing now and then. But when they do, I'm no longer bracing myself to be useful. I'm just present. Mina and I are learning how to be sisters without roles. Some weeks we talk about work, some weeks about nothing at all. Last month, she called just to say she handled a difficult day on her own and wanted to tell someone. I listened. I didn't fix it. That felt like progress. I no longer confuse peace with distance or boundaries with rejection. I've learned that clarity is often the most respectful thing you can offer, to yourself and to others. Every now and then, someone at work or in my personal life asks how I stay so composed in complicated situations. I don't give them a polished answer. I just say I stopped participating in dynamics that required me to disappear. There are other people in my life now who are quietly untangling similar situations. Friends, colleagues, someone I mentor who's learning how to say no for the first time. I recognize the signs right away. The calm voice, the over-responsibility, the silence that's been doing too much work. If that sounds familiar to you, you're not imagining it. And you're not wrong for wanting something healthier. If this story resonated with you, I'm really glad you were here. Please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps this channel reach people who might need these stories too. And if you feel comfortable, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read more of them than you might think. 2 more stories that viewers often connect with will be up next. I hope one of them meets you where you are.